My name is Robert Taylor, and until 3 months ago I thought I had the perfect life. At 42, everything about me screamed success, executive director of the Taylor Group, owner of a mansion in the most exclusive neighborhood in Beverly Hills, and husband to Jennifer, a woman admired by everyone who met her. I adjust my tie in the mirror, examining my reflection. Every detail matters in my world. My father taught me that appearances are everything. "Ready for dinner, honey?" Jennifer appears in the doorway. Her black dress hugs her figure perfectly. At 38, she still has the beauty that captivated me from the first moment I saw her. "Perfect, as always," I say, kissing her while breathing in her perfume. Our Mercedes glides through the illuminated streets. We're celebrating our first anniversary at the restaurant where I proposed. Jennifer stares out the window, lost in her thoughts. "Everything okay?" I ask, taking her hand. She turns with a smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. "Just thinking about how much we've accomplished together. We're the envy of everyone," I reply proudly. "My father always says we build our destiny with every decision. And we've built something perfect." The restaurant welcomes us with deference. I order champagne while Jennifer discreetly greets acquaintances. "To us," I toast. Jennifer clinks her glass. "To our future." The evening passes with memories and plans. I talk about expanding the company, following my father's vision. "George will be proud," Jennifer comments, her tone ambiguous. "My father is demanding, but fair," I respond. "He's built an empire through hard work." 2 days later, our Beverly Hills residence prepares for the Sunday visit from my parents. At 72, my father still maintains iron control over his empire. Rosa, our housekeeper, runs under Jennifer's instructions. The menu has been carefully selected, my parents' favorite dishes. George arrives punctually, leaning on an ebony cane he uses more for style than necessity. Jennifer, radiant as always, he greets with a calculated smile. During lunch, my mother doesn't miss an opportunity for her sharp comments. "The salad has too much salt," Elizabeth remarks, setting down her fork, "and the fish is slightly undercooked." Jennifer presses her lips into a forced smile. "I'm sorry it's not to your liking, Elizabeth." "Don't worry, dear. Not all of us are born with the instinct to run a household. Some talents are less obvious but more valuable," George interjects, looking at Jennifer intensely, like patience, determination, the ability to wait for the right moment. I quickly intervene. "Mom, Jennifer has been busy with the charity event. She raised over $500,000 in donations this year." "Of course," Elizabeth nods complacently. "Always so busy." It's admirable how she finds time for everything. The look between both women conveys what they leave unsaid. "Have you reviewed the reports I sent you?" George asks me. "That matter could be problematic if not handled properly." "Everything is under control, Father," I respond, "as you've always taught me." Jennifer observes our interaction with an unreadable expression. After dessert, we receive a visit from Mark and Lucy Adams, our best friends. On the terrace, while the men discuss business, the women converse apart. "I don't know how you tolerate your in-laws," Lucy whispers. "Every comment is a poisoned dart." Jennifer smiles resignedly. "Elizabeth will never forgive me for not being Allison." Allison had been my girlfriend for 6 years, chosen by my parents. The relationship ended when I met Jennifer in San Francisco. "Are you happy, Jennifer?" Jennifer looks toward the garden, where George converses with me. "I have everything any woman could desire." "That doesn't answer my question." "Happiness is an overrated concept, Lucy." Later, when everyone has left, I find Jennifer reviewing documents. "Working on Sunday?" I ask, massaging her shoulders. "The event is in a month. I want it to be perfect." "It always is. You have a gift for these things." I contemplate my wife, feeling fortunate. I've built exactly the life I dreamed of. Professional prestige, social respect, a beautiful and intelligent wife. "I love you," I say, kissing her neck. Jennifer closes her eyes momentarily. "I love you too." That night, while Jennifer pretends to sleep, I review my agenda for the week. I look at my sleeping wife next to me, her breathing calm, her face serene. What I don't know is that Jennifer is mentally reviewing a very different agenda, an agenda that includes a name that would change everything. Tyler Johnson. Wednesday began like any other day in my life. I woke up next to Jennifer, briefly admired her beauty while she slept, and silently left for my private gym. Afterward, in the Italian marble dining room, the chef served my usual breakfast while I reviewed the financial newspaper. Cat AT, the black Mercedes, was already waiting to take me to the imposing Taylor Group building. My phone vibrated while I was signing million-dollar contracts, a message from an unknown number. Your wife visits a prisoner, Tyler. I let out a dry laugh. Jennifer associated with a prisoner. Absurd. My wife was the perfect woman, the jewel of high society. Without hesitation, I deleted the message. Clearly it was a mistake or a stupid joke. Idiots, I muttered, immediately returning to my contracts. The rest of the day passed without me thinking about that nonsense again. That night, the Taylor mansion shone for the monthly dinner my mother organized with military precision. I watched Jennifer trying to converse with Elizabeth, who looked at her as if she were a cockroach on her expensive Persian rug. And how is the organization of that event of yours going? Elizabeth asked with barely disguised disdain. Excellent, Jennifer replied with a tense smile. We expect to surpass what we raised last year for... Allison organized a magnificent gala last week, Elizabeth abruptly interrupted, mentioning my ex-girlfriend and her eternal favorite. $3 million for the children's hospital. Her taste was always exquisite. I saw Jennifer swallow, maintaining her composure with difficulty. I felt a stab of anger toward my mother, but as always I kept silent. Your plate is untouched, Robert, George commented, observing me with that penetrating gaze that made everyone at the table tense up. What's wrong? Nothing, Father. Work matters. George set down his wineglass with a sharp tap. If their work matters, they should be my matters too. Or do you forget who built the empire you now direct? Of course not, Father, I replied, feeling that familiar sensation of shrinking before George Taylor's dominant figure. I'm just finalizing details for the merger with Valente. Is that it? Or is your wife distracting you? George shot a contemptuous look at Jennifer. A Taylor doesn't allow distractions. Control is power, son. One who doesn't control his house doesn't deserve to control an empire. I perfectly control my life, I responded with more firmness than usual. Really? George smiled with that icy smile that terrified his competitors. You were always the weakest of my sons, the most sentimental. That's precisely why you must be doubly vigilant. I'm just saying, my son, George continued as if explaining something obvious to a child, that nothing destroys a man faster than losing control over his family. And you, with your tendency toward indulgence, should be especially careful. The rest of the dinner was a minefield of venomous comments from Elizabeth and business interrogations from George. When we could finally leave, Jennifer remained silent during the entire journey home. Back at our mansion, I locked myself in my office while Jennifer prepared for bed. We didn't mention the disastrous dinner. It was our ritual to pretend my parents' hostility didn't exist. Past midnight, when I entered the bedroom, I found Jennifer sleeping, or pretending to sleep. I observed her under the dim light filtering through the curtains, her perfect profile, her elegance even in repose. However, as I slid under the Egyptian silk sheets, my father's words echoed in my head. Nothing destroys a man faster than losing control over his family. The following Monday, while reviewing million-dollar contracts for the Taylor Group's expansion in South America, I received a second message from an unknown number, like the one I had decided to ignore days before. Jennifer Taylor visits an inmate named Tyler in this prison, state penitentiary. Thursday, 10 a.m. This time the message not only mentioned my wife by her full name, but provided specific details, the alleged prisoner's name, place, and exact time. I felt a chill run down my spine. The precision of the information completely eliminated the possibility of a simple confusion or random joke. I tried again to dismiss that intrusion into my perfectly ordered life, but doubt had already taken deep root in my mind. I remembered that every Thursday, for approximately 6 months, Jennifer had mentioned morning committee meetings at the charitable foundation she chaired. Impossible, I muttered to myself, putting my phone in the inner pocket of my tailored suit. Jennifer was as transparent as crystal. She always told me everything. We shared every aspect of our lives. How could she be hiding something so significant? The next day, during breakfast on the sunny terrace of our mansion, I decided to subtly verify my wife's schedule. "Do you have the foundation meeting tomorrow?" I asked casually, while pretending to concentrate on the financial news. "Yes," she replied, pouring more coffee into her French porcelain cup. "We're finalizing the details for next month's event. Elena wants to review the menu with the catering team and finalize the guest list. Don't expect me for lunch. It will probably extend into the afternoon." The naturalness with which Jennifer responded momentarily reassured me. Her voice hadn't faltered. Her gaze remained serene. Her body language revealed no tension whatsoever. She was the same Jennifer as always, elegant, self-assured, perfectly composed. I felt ridiculous for having doubted. But that night, while trying to concentrate on some reports, doubt returned with greater force than before. What if those messages, as implausible as they seemed, contained some truth? Thursday morning, after Jennifer left elegantly dressed in a navy blue suit for her supposed meeting, I waited 30 minutes and then called Elena Garcia, executive director of the foundation and a close family friend. "Elena, good morning. Robert Taylor," I greeted in a professional tone. "Ois, I needed to speak urgently with Jennifer about the special donation we're preparing for the event, but her phone seems to be turned off or out of coverage." A brief silence on the other end of the line made my heart race. "I'm sorry, Robert," Elena finally replied with a slightly confused voice. "Jennifer isn't here today. In fact, she mentioned yesterday that she had another important commitment and couldn't attend our weekly meeting." Upon hanging up the phone, I remained motionless in my large Italian leather executive chair, feeling as if an abyss was opening beneath my feet. Jennifer wasn't where she had said she would be. She had deliberately lied to me about her whereabouts. Perhaps another commitment had arisen. Perhaps she had forgotten to mention it in the whirlwind of her multiple social and philanthropic activities. Or perhaps the anonymous message was telling the truth. Friday morning, while I tried to concentrate on a presentation for the board of directors, I received a third message, this time accompanied by a photograph, a blurry image of a woman entering a grey, institutional building. The quality was terrible, probably taken with zoom from afar and subsequently enlarged, but the haircut, posture, and slender silhouette eerily resembled Jennifer's. "The truth is in plain sight," the message said. "Do you still need more proof?" I observed the image for a long time, enlarging it, trying to distinguish details that could confirm or rule out that it was my wife. The doubt, which until that moment had been barely a seed, began to grow like a poisonous vine, extending to every corner of my mind, suffocating the trust that had been the pillar of our marriage. That night, during dinner in the main dining room of our mansion, I intensely observed Jennifer, while she animatedly explained the supposed advances of the charitable committee and its preparations for the following month's big event. Every word, every gesture, every inflection of her voice now sounded hollow, possibly false. "You're very quiet," she commented, pouring more wine into my glass. "Has it been a difficult day at the office?" "Intense," I responded vaguely, not wanting to go into details. Then, almost without planning, as if the words emerged of their own volition, I asked, "Jennifer, do you know anyone named Tyler?" My wife briefly stopped her fork midway to her mouth. It was just a moment, a microsecond of hesitation, but I noticed it clearly. However, Jennifer's recovery was impeccable, almost virtuosic in its naturalness. "Tyler?" she repeated with a genuinely confused expression. "Not that I recall." "Why do you ask?" "It's curious. I heard you mention that name while you were sleeping last night," I lied, closely observing her reaction. "I wondered if it was someone from work or from the foundation." "Really?" Jennifer let out a small nervous laugh. "How strange. I don't remember dreaming about any Tyler." She took a sip of wine before continuing. Although it's quite a common name, don't you think? Perhaps I heard it somewhere during the day. I nodded, surprised by the naturalness of Jennifer's response. I must have imagined it then, I replied with a smile, considering the matter settled. The subconscious plays strange tricks on us sometimes. That night, while watching my wife sleep peacefully beside me, her face serene under the dim light filtering through the curtains, I debated in a sea of contradictory doubts. Jennifer's reaction to the name Tyler had been so convincing that it had almost managed to dispel my suspicions. I closed my eyes, trying to find clarity in the darkness. I couldn't continue living with these doubts eating away at my mind, poisoning every moment with Jennifer. I needed certainties, not conjectures or vague assumptions, and I knew exactly how to obtain them. I wasn't willing to continue living in uncertainty. If Jennifer was hiding something, I needed to know it, face it, no matter how painful it might be. After a meticulous and discreet search, I contacted Hector Vidal, a private detective recommended in exclusive circles for his professionalism and, above all, for his absolute discretion. I need complete surveillance on this person, I instructed, sliding a recent photograph of Jennifer across the desk of the discreet office where we had agreed to meet. I'm particularly interested in knowing her movements on Thursdays between 9 and 11 in the morning. Any particular reason for that time frame? Vidal asked professionally, without a hint of personal curiosity. I simply need to confirm her usual movements, I replied, avoiding getting into personal details. Maximum discretion, of course. No one should know about this investigation. Absolutely no one. A week later, as agreed, Vidal presented his preliminary report in my private office, ensuring that no one in the company knew about his visit. I have information about your wife, the detective informed 2 days after being hired. So, according to my contact at the state penitentiary, she visits an inmate every 2 weeks, always Thursday morning. Are you completely sure? Absolutely, Vidal confirmed. My source works in the visitor registry. Mrs. Taylor arrives punctually at 10:05, registers day and stays for approximately an hour. Additionally, in the weeks she doesn't visit the prison, she goes to a law firm specialized in criminal cases, Martinez and Associates. Have you been able to confirm specifically who she visits? I asked, trying to maintain my composure. A man named Tyler Johnson, the detective replied, consulting his notes. My contact will provide me with his file for our next meeting. For now, I can only confirm that these visits are regular, and that Mrs. Taylor is the only visitor this inmate receives. I felt as if I had been punched directly in the stomach, expelling all the air from my lungs. As much as the anonymous messages had prepared me for this possibility, the confirmation was devastating. Who exactly is she visiting? I asked in a tense voice, containing the emotional storm unleashing inside me. An inmate named Tyler Johnson, Vidal replied, handing me a photograph extracted from the prison file. 33 years old, sentenced to 15 years in prison for first-degree murder and aggravated robbery. I observed the image of the man, undeniably attractive, with penetrating dark eyes, a strong jaw, and defined features. I felt an involuntary primitive stab of jealousy, imagining my wife in front of that man. What relationship do they have? Are they relatives? Distant cousins, perhaps? Not according to official visit records. She registers simply as a friend, Vidal responded. I need to know everything about this man, I ordered, feeling how the initial sensation of betrayal was slowly transforming into a cold determination. The exact circumstances of his conviction, any connection with Jennifer, no matter how insignificant it seems, everything. 3 days later, punctual as always, Vidal returned with a considerably more voluminous file. I received him in my private office at home, making sure Jennifer was at her yoga class. Johnson worked as a bodyguard and personal assistant for Lauren Mitchell, an extremely wealthy real estate businesswoman with connections in the highest circles of power, Vidal explained, opening his investigation folder. He was accused of murdering her during an apparent robbery at her main residence. The evidence presented against him included his fingerprints on the murder weapon and valuable objects belonging to the victim found in his apartment. I frowned, trying to remember. That name, Mitchell, Sounds familiar. It should sound familiar, the detective confirmed. It was quite a high-profile case 2 years ago. The most interesting thing is that your father, George Taylor, testified at the trial. My father? I leaned forward, surprised. Yes. According to court records, Johnson directly accused your father of being involved in the murder. George testified to deny such accusations, describing them as desperate defamations from a criminal. I ran my hand over my face, vaguely remembering having heard something about the case. I was in Asia during those months, supervising the expansion in the Eastern market. I remember my father briefly mentioning a crazy man who had accused him of something. And my wife. What exact connection does she have with this man? I asked, trying to maintain a professional tone while feeling that the pieces of a sinister puzzle were beginning to fit together. Vidal briefly hesitated, as if evaluating the best way to present the information. According to my sources, your wife was Tyler Johnson's girlfriend when the crime occurred. There is no mention of her in the trial. Are you sure of this? I felt my mouth go dry. Completely. And there's another significant detail. According to my records, your wife met you just 3 months after Johnson's final conviction. The office, normally a space of control and security for me, now seemed suffocating. Jennifer, my perfect and immaculate Jennifer, had hidden not only that she regularly visited a prisoner, but that prisoner was her ex-boyfriend, a man convicted of a brutal murder who had accused my father, and most disturbing, the chronology suggested a connection too convenient to be coincidence. I couldn't find the appropriate words as the implications unfolded in my mind, like a slow-motion nightmare. I need time to process this, I muttered, feeling pressure in my chest. Continue the investigation. I want to know absolutely everything about this case. When the detective left, I remained motionless in my office, trying to assimilate the information. The revelation that my father had testified in the trial against Tyler Johnson, Jennifer's ex-boyfriend, and that he had been directly accused by him, couldn't be a simple coincidence. There were too many disturbing connections. Jennifer, Tyler, my father, a murder, and now my marriage. Why had my father never clearly mentioned his participation in that case? He had only made vague references to a crazy man who had accused him of something. What relationship did George have with the victim, Lauren Mitchell, and why had Jennifer approached me precisely after Tyler's conviction? I needed answers that the private detective, with all his efficiency, couldn't provide. I needed someone with privileged access to the judicial system. I then remembered Jason Mendez, a university colleague, now a police lieutenant with considerable influence in the department. I need a favor, Jason, I said after the preliminary greetings in a discreet cafe away from downtown. It's personal and extremely delicate. I'm listening, Jason replied, clearly intrigued. My wife regularly visits a prisoner named Tyler Johnson at the state penitentiary. I just discovered that this man accused my father of being involved in the murder for which he was convicted. I need to know what really happened in that case, what was said during the trial that didn't reach the press. Jason frowned, clearly uncomfortable with the request. That information is confidential, Robert. Sealed court records are not publicly accessible for a reason. Please, I insisted. I wouldn't ask if it weren't extremely important to me. My entire life could be built on a lie. After a long, contemplative silence, he nodded with evident reluctance. I'll see what I can find out, he finally conceded. But I can't promise you anything, Robert. During the following weeks, I tried to act normally around Jennifer. Every smile, every kiss, every everyday conversation now felt like an elaborate lie. Who really was the woman I had married? And what role did my father play in this whole story? A week after my meeting with Jason, I received his call. The lieutenant's voice sounded tense. We need to talk, not over the phone, was all he said. We met at a discreet restaurant on the outskirts of Los Angeles. Jason seemed nervous, constantly looking around. Charged during a routine inspection, we confiscated a mobile phone in Johnson's cell, he explained in a low voice. A corrupt guard facilitated it. There are recordings of his conversations with several people, including your wife. I felt my heart accelerate. Have you listened to them? Some, Jason replied, discreetly sliding a USB drive across the table. This never happened. Understood? That night, I waited for Jennifer to fall asleep. With trembling hands, I connected the drive to my computer and put on headphones. The first recording was from 3 months ago. Jennifer's voice came through clearly. "How are you? Are they treating you well?" "As well as can be expected," replied the male voice that must be Tyler. "How's our matter progressing? Moving forward. Robert trusts me completely. I'll soon have access to the information we need about George," Jennifer continued. "Robert constantly mentions important documents kept in his father's safe. Be careful, Jennifer. If George suspects anything, he suspects nothing. He sees me as his son's perfect trophy wife, beautiful, discreet, with no ambitions of her own." I stopped the recording, trying to breathe. Was it possible that my entire married life was an elaborate lie? After a few minutes, I continued listening. The next recording, from just a month ago, would confirm my worst fears. "Sometimes I wonder if we're doing the right thing," Jennifer was saying, her voice softer. "Robert isn't like his father." "Are you falling in love with him?" Tyler's voice sounded tense, jealous. "Don't be ridiculous. I married Robert for a specific reason, to gain access to the Taylors and get the evidence we need against George." I turned off the computer, unable to listen to more. The pain was unbearable, physical, as if something vital had broken inside me. Jennifer, my Jennifer, had never really existed. She was a character created to infiltrate my life, to use me as a pawn in a game of revenge. That night I didn't return to the bedroom. I sat in my office until dawn, mentally reviewing every moment of my marriage, every "I love you," every smile, every caress. Everything had been a lie. The next day, when Jennifer asked why I had slept in my office, I responded with a lie, accumulated work, a video conference with Tokyo at 4 in the morning. "I'll be back late," I said before leaving. I couldn't bear to be near her, not now that I knew the truth. I needed to know more, needed to understand the true motive behind this coldly calculated revenge that had turned my marriage into a cruel farce. I needed to discover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. When I arrived at my office, I listened to the rest of the recordings. In them, Jennifer and Tyler mentioned a plan to expose George or to prove that he had actually murdered the businesswoman for whom Tyler was serving time. What I couldn't understand was, is Tyler really innocent? If so, what would be George Taylor's motive, one of the most powerful businessmen in the country, to murder a woman and destroy an innocent person's life? In the last recording, I heard something that chilled my blood. "George didn't just kill Lauren," Jennifer was saying. "There's something worse, something that not even Robert knows, something that could destroy not only his father, but the entire Taylor family." What other secret was my father hiding? What could be worse than murder? While I tried to understand my wife's motivations miles away in the solitude of his cell, Tyler Johnson relived once more the events that had destroyed his life 2 years ago. It was a nightly ritual, a way to stay sane in that concrete and metal hell. He closed his eyes and returned to that fateful day, trying to remember every detail, looking for something that could prove his innocence. That day had begun like any other. Tyler, as Lauren Mitchell's personal bodyguard, had accompanied her to several business meetings. The businesswoman seemed tense, worried. "Tyler, there's something I need to tell you," she had said during the return journey. "I've discovered very compromising information about George Taylor, documents that prove bribes to officials to obtain government contracts." Tyler remembered feeling uneasy. George Taylor was a powerful man, dangerous when he felt threatened. "What do you plan to do, ma'am?" "The right thing. I'll turn everything over to the authorities tomorrow." Upon arriving at the mansion, Lauren asked him to wait in the car. "It will just be a moment. I need to review some documents." 15 minutes passed, and Tyler began to worry. His bodyguard instinct told him something wasn't right. He entered the house and noticed the front door was ajar. Following security protocol, he cautiously advanced toward Lauren's office. As he approached, he saw a man hastily leaving through the side door. He immediately recognized him, George Taylor. Tyler entered the office and found a scene that would forever be etched in his memory. The safe open and empty, and Lauren Mitchell lying on the floor with a knife stuck in her chest. Blood formed a dark pool beneath her body. Acting on instinct, he knelt beside her and extracted the knife to check if she was still breathing. It was then that he heard a scream. Maria, the housekeeper, had entered and was looking at him in horror. "Murderer!" the woman shouted. "Help! He's killed Mrs. Mitchell." Tyler tried to explain, but the words stuck in his throat. And then, as a macabre coincidence, George Taylor returned to the scene, entering through the main door with a perfectly calculated expression of surprise. "What's happening here?" he asked, as if he hadn't been there moments before. "This man has killed Mrs. Mitchell," exclaimed Maria, pointing at Tyler. When Tyler tried to explain that he had seen George leave the office moments before, the housekeeper contradicted him. "Mr. Taylor just arrived with me from the main entrance." It was a lie. Tyler knew it. But he was trapped in an impossible situation, kneeling next to his boss's body, with the murder weapon in his hand, contradicted by two witnesses. The police arrived minutes later. Tyler was immediately arrested. During the interrogation, he insisted on his version. He had seen George Taylor leave the office. The safe was open. Lauren was already dead when he entered. Nobody believed him. Why would a respected businessman like Taylor murder a businesswoman? It was much more credible that the bodyguard, with access to the house and knowledge of the victim's routines, had committed the crime. The evidence didn't take long to appear. The weapon had his fingerprints. In his apartment, they found valuable jewelry that he had supposedly stolen from Lauren's safe, although Tyler had never seen them before. Jennifer, his girlfriend of 5 years, was the only one who believed in his innocence without question. She went everywhere seeking help. Lawyers, journalists, human rights activists. Everyone closed their doors to her. The case was too clear, the evidence too compelling, and behind it all was the powerful shadow of George Taylor, silencing any doubt with his influence. Tyler clearly remembered the day Jennifer came to visit him in prison with a new determination in her eyes. "I've tried every legal path," she said simply. "No one dares to face the Taylors. Their money and influence are too powerful." It was then that Jennifer changed. "George will pay for this," she had promised firmly. "I had an idea," Jennifer said. "George has a younger son, Robert. He's different from his father, more sensitive, more vulnerable. He's engaged to Allison, the Thorntons' daughter, but they've been in a relationship for years without setting a wedding date." "Jennifer, no." Tyler immediately understood what she was planning. "It's the only way. I'll infiltrate the family. I'll make Robert notice me, break his engagement. From inside, I'll find the evidence we need to prove your innocence and George's guilt." "You're condemning yourself to a life of lies." "It could take years. I don't care how long it takes. The only thing that matters is that justice is served, that you go free and George Taylor pays for his crimes." Now, 2 years later, Tyler stared at the ceiling of his cell, reliving that conversation. Jennifer's sacrifice had been immense, almost 2 years living a lie, married to the son of the man who had destroyed their lives, but it would soon be over. Jennifer had found evidence, documents that would definitively incriminate George. In a matter of days, the plan they had conceived throughout this time would finally be realized. What Tyler couldn't know, in the solitude of his cell, was that Robert Taylor already knew part of the truth, that Jennifer's husband had discovered the recordings and was now seeking answers on his own, and that those answers could change everything. The next day, I called Detective Vidal again. "Shall I need detailed information about Lauren Mitchell, the woman murdered 2 years ago, I said without preamble. "According to the recordings, my father was at her house the night of the crime. I want to know exactly what kind of relationship they had, why he was visiting her house if they barely knew each other professionally." "I understand your concern," the detective responded cautiously. "Official records indicate that your father and Mrs. Mitchell only maintained business relations, but I'll investigate further. I need the complete truth, Vidal. I want to know what my father was doing at that house the night of the murder, and why Tyler Johnson accused him so specifically. Find out everything possible about the trial, especially the details that didn't reach the press." I knew I was treading on dangerous ground, but I could no longer ignore the evidence. If my father had really been involved in a murder, I needed to know. While waiting for the results of the investigation, I decided to inquire on my own. In the family mansion's library, I found archived newspapers from that time. The articles about the Mitchell case described Tyler as a calculating criminal who had betrayed his employer's trust. George Taylor was briefly mentioned as a defense witness who had denied absurd and unfounded accusations against him. No article mentioned Jennifer or suggested that Tyler had a girlfriend. 3 days later, Vidal delivered a detailed report. Lauren Mitchell, 48 years old, owner of Mitchell Properties, a medium-sized but strategic company that blocked the Taylor Group's expansion in several areas, the detective explained. According to various sources, your father repeatedly tried to buy these properties, but she refused to sell. Any other connection? I asked, feeling I was approaching something important. Vidal hesitated. I'm investigating some rumors about a possible personal relationship between the victim and your father. I don't have confirmation yet, but there are indications. What kind of indications? I'm trying to locate Mitchell's former chauffeur. According to some sources, he might have relevant information about places the victim regularly visited. I'm also checking the ownership of certain properties that might be linked to the case. Keep me informed of any progress, I replied, feeling growing unease. I will, Mr. Taylor. Allow me to continue investigating before drawing hasty conclusions. There's another strange thing. The housekeeper who testified against Johnson, Maria Sanchez, resigned immediately after the trial and moved to Argentina. No one has been able to locate her since then. This perfectly coincided with Tyler's version. I felt I was getting closer to the truth, but I needed concrete evidence, not just circumstantial. Was there any record, any document that Mitchell might have had against my father? Something that would explain a possible motive for a crime? Vidal shook his head. The contents of the safe were never officially catalogued. It was assumed to contain jewelry and money, which Johnson supposedly stole. I remembered something I had heard in the recordings. Tyler mentioned that Mitchell had information that could sink my father, something related to government contracts. That could explain many things, Vidal nodded. At that time, the Taylor Group obtained several multi-million-dollar public contracts under questionable circumstances. There's a way to confirm it, I finally said. I need access to my father's confidential files, documents he keeps in his personal safe. That's beyond my capabilities, Mr. Taylor. I understand. This I'll have to do myself. That night, during a family dinner at the Taylor mansion, I observed my father with new eyes. Jennifer accompanied me. During dessert, I casually brought up the topic, carefully observing both my father and my wife. I was reading about famous criminal cases and remembered the murder of that businesswoman, Lauren Mitchell. You testified at that trial, didn't you, Father? The effect was immediate and revealing. George set down his cognac glass with too abrupt a movement, while Jennifer, beside me, tensed almost imperceptibly. What's this sudden interest in old cases? George asked, visibly uncomfortable. I noticed Jennifer quickly regained her composure. Her eyes, however, observed me with intensity. Simple curiosity. I read that her bodyguard directly accused you of the crime. Nonsense, George replied with forced disdain. The guy was desperate, looking for a scapegoat. And why did he choose you specifically? What are you implying, Robert? I wonder why he would specifically accuse you, I replied with apparent innocence. What relationship did you have with Lauren Mitchell, Father? Why were you at her house that night? A tense silence fell over the table. Elizabeth paled. George clenched his fists on the tablecloth. I wasn't at her house that night, he replied coldly. That criminal invented that accusation to divert attention. The determination with which he insists on his innocence is curious, Jennifer intervened, leaning slightly forward. I've read old reports on the case. For a simple bodyguard, he seemed very sure about accusing you. Elizabeth intervened, clearly uncomfortable. This isn't an appropriate topic for dinner. Why don't we talk about next month's charity gala? On the contrary, Jennifer replied with a too sweet smile. I think it's fascinating. Don't you think, Robert? A whole unsolved mystery. The word of a powerful man against that of a simple employee. I noticed how my father looked at Jennifer, with a mixture of irritation and something else. There's no mystery, George abruptly cut in. The case is closed, the culprit in prison. And I won't allow my integrity to be questioned at my own table. No one is questioning anything, Father, I intervened, carefully observing the dynamic between Jennifer and George. We're just trying to understand a case that seems to have certain inconsistencies. George suddenly stood up, throwing his napkin on the table. This conversation is over. If you'll excuse me, I have pending work. As George left the dining room, I had seen what I needed. The momentary flash of fear in my father's eyes, his disproportionate defensive reaction, and Jennifer's strange insistence on keeping the topic alive. George Taylor, the man who never showed weakness, had completely lost his composure at the mere mention of the Mitchell case. Upon returning home, Jennifer seemed strangely animated. "Your father reacted in a very peculiar way, don't you think?" she commented, while removing her earrings in front of the mirror. "I've never seen him lose control like that." I observed her through the reflection, looking for signs of her true intention. "You seem very interested in the Mitchell case." Jennifer shrugged with studied indifference. "I'm interested in justice. Simply, I've always thought that powerful people tend to get away with things. Is that why you mentioned the word of a powerful man against that of a simple employee?" "I was just expressing an observation," she replied, turning to look at me directly. "Why did you bring up the topic, Robert? It doesn't seem like casual dinner conversation." I felt the weight of her gaze, calculating and penetrating. "As I said, simple curiosity. You know you can count on me for whatever you need," she said, approaching to kiss me. I felt a wave of repulsion receiving her kiss, now knowing that every gesture of affection was part of an elaborate lie. That night, while Jennifer slept, I made a decision. If my father was really guilty of murder, he would have to face the consequences. But first, I needed concrete evidence, not just the words of Tyler and Jennifer. And I knew exactly where to look for it. In George Taylor's personal safe, hidden behind a painting in his private office, justice had to prevail, regardless of the culprit's surname. The Imperial Hotel's grand ballroom glittered under hundreds of golden lights. The annual Taylor Foundation Charity Gala was the most important social event of the year, an occasion where the elite could flaunt their generosity while networking and closing deals under the guise of philanthropy. Jennifer and I arrived together, she on my arm, both projecting an image of perfect marital harmony. The flashes from photographers momentarily blinded us as we walked the red carpet. "The Taylor couple, radiant as always," commented a journalist, bringing a microphone closer. "Jennifer, that dress is spectacular." Jennifer smiled mechanically, thanking for the compliment. Beneath the surface of calm, her heart was racing. Upon entering the main hall, we were immediately approached by Elizabeth Taylor, the family matriarch, elegantly dressed but with a tense face. "Finally, you've arrived," said Elizabeth, coldly kissing Jennifer's cheek. "Your father is finishing preparing for his speech, Robert. He's been asking for you." "How is he?" I asked, maintaining a neutral tone, as always before speaking in public. "Focused, reviewing his notes until the last minute," Elizabeth replied. "He's in the private room. The speech will begin in about 20 minutes. We made our way through the hall, receiving greetings and congratulations for organizing the event. Jennifer and I headed toward the small room adjacent to the main hall, where George usually prepared before his speeches. Seeing us enter, George looked up from his notes. "Robert, Jennifer," he greeted, rising to shake my hand and kiss my wife's cheek. "Finally, you've arrived. I was concerned about your delay." "Traffic," I apologized naturally. "When do you give your speech, Father?" "In 20 minutes, George replied, consulting his elegant gold watch. "I was going over my notes one last time. I want to announce the merger with Valente Group in a special way tonight." George seemed completely calm, unaware of the storm approaching. There was no sign of worry or suspicion in him, just the usual arrogance of someone who feels untouchable. If you'll excuse me, I must greet the Martinezes. They've just arrived." The orchestra played softly while waiters circulated among guests with trays of champagne and exquisite appetizers. Jennifer took a sip from her glass, trying to calm her nerves. I watched her with calculated coldness. "You're tense," I observed. "It wasn't a question, but a statement. It's an important event," she responded evasively. "I've never seen you like this before," I replied, my tone distant but penetrating. "It's as if you're expecting something to happen." Jennifer looked away, unable to face my scrutiny. "You're imagining things." "Am I?" I took a sip of my champagne, without taking my eyes off her. "I suppose we'll find out soon." It was evident that I suspected something important was going to happen, though I didn't know exactly what. At that moment, a murmur ran through the hall. Jennifer and I followed the guests, gazes toward the main entrance. Tyler Johnson had just entered the event. He wore a simple but elegant dark suit. His face, thinner and marked by months in prison, nevertheless maintained the beauty Jennifer remembered. He advanced determinedly among the guests, who stepped aside as he passed. Jennifer felt her heart stop. I followed her gaze, my expression becoming even colder. Tyler had seen Jennifer. Their gazes met across the hall, but then Tyler's eyes fell on me beside her, and a shadow crossed his face. George had also noticed the newcomer's presence. His face visibly paled, and for a moment it seemed like he might collapse. He recovered quickly, however, and with a determined step headed toward the stage where he was scheduled to give his speech. The guests, perceiving the dramatic tension unfolding before their eyes, fell silent as George took the microphone. "Distinguished guests," he began, his voice slightly less firm than usual. "It is an honor to welcome you to this 20th annual charity gala of the Taylor Foundation." While George continued with his speech, the hall doors opened again. Several police officers entered discreetly. They remained at the entrance, not intervening but with evident purpose. "The police," Jennifer murmured, feeling the situation was rapidly escaping her control. I didn't even seem surprised. I observed the entire scene with the calm of someone watching something they had already expected unfold. My coldness was more disturbing to Jennifer than any emotional reaction would have been. George, from the stage, tried to maintain his composure while continuing his speech, but it was evident that the combined presence of Tyler and the police had deeply disturbed him. Jennifer felt the decisive moment had arrived. Her hand slid toward her purse, where she kept the USB drive with the evidence. Tyler was slowly advancing toward the stage, his eyes fixed alternately on George and Jennifer. With accelerated breathing and her heart beating wildly, Jennifer decisively advanced toward the stage. The moment had come. The truth would finally come to light, regardless of personal consequences. Jennifer climbed onto the stage with a firm step, ignoring George's surprised look. Without asking permission, she took the microphone from his hands as he finished a sentence about the Foundation's charitable achievements. "Thank you, Mr. Taylor," Jennifer said, in a clear, firm voice that resonated throughout the hall. "But tonight, we're not just here to celebrate the charitable work of the Taylor Foundation, we're here for the truth to finally come to light." A murmur of confusion ran through the hall. George tried to recover the microphone, but Jennifer stepped back, away from his reach. 2 years ago, Jennifer continued, Lauren Mitchell was brutally murdered in her mansion. A man, Tyler Johnson, was convicted for that crime and has spent the last 2 years in prison. Jennifer pointed toward Tyler, who remained standing near the stage, his gaze fixed on George. "But Tyler Johnson is innocent," Jennifer declared in a powerful voice. "The real murderer of Lauren Mitchell is here among us. It's George Taylor." The hall erupted in exclamations of astonishment and disbelief. Elizabeth Taylor let out a stifled cry, bringing her hands to her chest. George advanced toward Jennifer, his face distorted with fury. "Shut up," he shouted, trying to snatch the microphone. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying," Jennifer responded, maintaining her composure while raising the USB drive high for all to see. "And I have evidence." She turned to one of the technicians managing the event's audio-visual system. "Please, connect this to the main screen." The technician looked at George, uncertain about what to do. The atmosphere had become charged with an almost palpable tension. To everyone's surprise, especially Jennifer's, I climbed onto the stage and stood next to her. "Do it," I ordered the technician with a firm but calm voice. "It's time for everyone to know the truth." Surprised by my intervention, the technician took the USB drive and connected it to the system. On the enormous screen behind the stage appeared financial documents, photographs, and finally, an audio recording. "These are the pieces of evidence that demonstrate George Taylor's guilt," Jennifer explained, pointing to the screen. "And this," Jennifer continued, "is the sworn statement of Maria Sanchez, the housekeeper who testified against Tyler. Here she admits that George paid her to lie, to declare that she saw Tyler commit the crime when in reality it was George who murdered Lauren." The screen then showed bank records with million-dollar transfers. "These are the payments George made to Maria Sanchez from an account in the Cayman Islands, $2 million, to buy her silence and her false testimony." George, seeing the situation slipping from his control, tried to interrupt again. "This is all a farce," he shouted, trying to approach Jennifer. "This woman is crazy. She's obsessed with that criminal." I stood between my father and Jennifer. "Let her finish, Father," I said with a firmness that surprised all present, including Jennifer. "Enough is enough," Jennifer continued, revealing every detail of the crime and the cover-up, the secret relationship between George and Lauren, how she threatened to expose fraudulent practices of the Taylor Company if he ended their relationship, the murder committed in a moment of fury, and how Tyler, who worked as a bodyguard at the mansion, became the perfect scapegoat. "I present this evidence because justice must prevail over power and influence. Tyler Johnson has spent 2 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit, while the real culprit enjoyed prestige and freedom." All eyes turned to George, who seemed to have aged 10 years in a matter of minutes. "Everything Jennifer has said is true," I declared in a firm voice. "I've investigated on my own and reached the same conclusion. My father murdered Lauren Mitchell and sent an innocent man to prison." Jennifer looked at me in astonishment, unable to believe what she was hearing. "Robert," she whispered, confused by my unexpected support. George, seeing that his own son was publicly betraying him, completely lost control. "Ungrateful," he shouted, his face distorted with rage. "Everything I've built has been for you. For this family's legacy." "At what cost, Father?" I replied with disturbing calm. "At the cost of a woman's life, of an innocent man's freedom, of bribes, lies, and manipulation. That's not the legacy I want." The police officers, who had listened to all the revelations, advanced toward the stage. One of them, who appeared to be in charge, came up and addressed George. "George Taylor," he said firmly, "you're under arrest for the murder of Lauren Mitchell, obstruction of justice, and witness bribery." As the officers handcuffed George, Elizabeth Taylor collapsed in her seat, suffering what appeared to be a nervous breakdown. Several people rushed to assist her as she sobbed uncontrollably. "This won't end here," George shouted as the police escorted him out of the hall. "I'm George Taylor. I have contacts, lawyers." "You can't do this to me." His shouts faded as he moved away, leaving behind a hall immersed in chaos and confusion. Jennifer observed the scene with a mixture of contradictory emotions, the relief that justice was finally being served, and confusion at my unexpected support. Tyler approached us, climbing onto the stage with a determined step. His eyes shone with contained emotion. "You did it," he said, taking Jennifer's hands. "Justice will finally be served." Without warning, he tried to kiss her on the lips, a kiss meant to be of gratitude, love, and celebration. Jennifer, surprised, subtly turned her face, making the kiss land on her cheek. Tyler slowly stepped back, confused. He looked at me, still standing next to Jennifer with an impenetrable expression, and then back at her. At that moment, he seemed to understand. "You really fell in love with George Taylor's son," Tyler said, with a mixture of disbelief and pain in his voice. "Tyler, Jennifer began, but the words caught in her throat. How to explain what she herself didn't fully understand? Tyler stared at her, a gaze laden with pain but also a strange resignation. "Don't say anything," he interrupted in a quiet voice. "I see it in your eyes." He moved away without waiting for a response, losing himself among the crowd that was hastily beginning to abandon the hall. When most of the guests had left and only a few journalists remained trying to capture the last details of the scandal, Jennifer turned to me. "Thank you for supporting me," she said in a trembling voice. "You didn't have to do it." I looked at her, my face a mask of cold composure. Now that we were almost alone, the emotional distance between us was palpable. "I didn't do it for you," I replied in a voice Jennifer barely recognized. "I did it for the truth. My father is guilty, and an innocent man has paid for his crimes. That's the only thing that matters." "Robert," Jennifer took a step toward me, desperately searching for some sign of warmth in my eyes. "There's so much I need to explain to you." "There's nothing to explain," I interrupted her. "I understand everything perfectly. You approached me with a purpose. You used me to get to my father. Everything between us was part of a plan." "Not everything," Jennifer insisted, tears threatening to spill. "What I feel for you is real. I love you, Robert." "How can I believe that now?" I asked, my voice laden with barely contained pain. "How can I separate truth from lies after all this?" "Give me a chance," she pleaded. "Let me prove it to you." I looked at her for a long moment, as if memorizing her face one last time. "Forget me, Jennifer," I finally said, with a quiet but firm voice. "It's best for both of us." "Don't ask me to do that," she replied, tears now freely flowing down her cheeks. "Not after everything we've shared." "What exactly have we shared?" I asked bitterly. "A life built on lies. A marriage based on revenge. Robert, please, goodbye, Jennifer." With these words, I turned around and walked away, leaving Jennifer alone on the empty stage, surrounded by the aftermath of the chaos we had unleashed. Justice had finally arrived for Tyler, but for Jennifer the price of that justice had been too high. She had lost the man who, against all odds, she had come to love with all her soul. Did this story touch your heart? Do you think Jennifer deserved a second chance after so much pain? Leave your like, share and comment your opinion. Subscribe so you don't miss these stories and watch the next video that will appear on screen. Thank you for joining me in these emotions.